all of those kinds of scenarios. So it's written that, yes, you can start at the beginning and read it all the way through. Or if you have an acute situation, you're like, you know what, right now I've got a micromanaging boss and she is driving me crazy. Okay, let me flip to that chapter, and it walks you through what to say, why it works, and where you take the conversation from there.
It's time to pivot in your confidence, career, and compensation with the 5-Minute Career Hack Podcast every Monday and Thursday. Now, here's part 2 of powerful phrases for dealing with workplace conflict with Karin and David. So let's talk a little bit more about how you all structured this amazing book on conflict. I'd love for you to share that, because for me, it's the perfect way. It's the way that I like to learn. I don't like to necessarily, I like reading books that kind of go from beginning to end, and you kind of have to read it all. But I value and I cherish and I go back to the books that are written from a reference standpoint, where I can go back and plug into a chapter that I'm in need of. So that's what I see in your book. I'm sure that was the intent. I'm confident that was the intent. But I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So we start with the foundation. So those dimensions that we just talked about. So laying out what are some of the causes of conflict, what are the benefits of working through it. Then we start with the conversations that you need to have with yourself, because before we get to anyone else, we need to start with ourselves. What do I really want in this situation? What happens if I stay silent? What's the cost if I don't start the conversation? And so then we equip people throughout the book. It's called Powerful Phrases because there are 300 plus specific phrases that you can use to have these conversations in a whole lot of different scenarios. So as we get started with those 4 dimensions and the cost of not speaking up, and the courage to speak up, and how you can develop that, how you can start those conversations, then we have the GOATs that Karin was just describing. Those kind of, we call them the greatest of all time, because those 3 questions for each of the dimensions of connection, clarity, curiosity, and commitment, you can use them in so many different circumstances. So if you only have time for one chapter, that's the chapter, because it's going to equip you for a variety of things. But then we get really specific. And so we start with tackling tricky workplace situations. So like, what if you need to say no to your boss, you're feeling overwhelmed, or you feel invisible or ignored, or your team is not being accountable, or you're working in a place where other people see the world very differently than you do. So like all those kinds of tricky situations, there's a chapter for each one with very specific phrases. And at the end of each chapter, you find all of the phrases, and it tells you, is this a clarity, a curiosity? It tells you what dimension you're looking at, so you can think about what that conversation needs. Then we go to managing up. So all of the workplace conflicts that you might have with a boss, maybe they're a micromanager, maybe they're stealing credit for your ideas, or they're giving really vague, frustrating feedback that's not very useful to you. And what do you do with that? Or one of my favorites, because this has happened to me, you're too negative. And so if the boss thinks you're too negative, and what do I do with that? How do I respond? So you've got some specific phrases for those. Maybe your boss is a moody screamer or drops F-bombs all the time. Like, what do I do? What do I say? And then the final section is about difficult people at work in general. So you've got lazy coworkers, or know-it-alls, or gossips, bullies, people who are crushing your ideas, passive-aggressive folks, challenging customers. All right, we all have to deal with challenging customers different ways. So all of those kinds of scenarios. So it's written that, yes, you can start at the beginning and read it all the way through. Or if you have an acute situation, you're like, you know what, right now I've got a micromanaging boss and she is driving me crazy. Okay, let me flip to that chapter, and it walks you through what to say, why it works, and where you take the conversation from there.
And you mentioned acute conflict emergency, which I love that. I love a good acronym. I was like, when y'all mentioned that in the book, I was just like, oh, that's good. I'm going to be quoting that all the time. But that's oftentimes, especially with a book like this, if some people are reaching for it, right, unless it's been given to them by a mentor or a coach. So any mentors and coaches out there, this would be a great book to share with the people that you're working with. But if I'm in need, right, I'm probably in need for a specific conflict. So that acute, conflict emergency, that ACE, right, you'll be able to go to a specific chapter and have some tools, have some phrases to be able to divulge and put into work right away to solve that conflict. So I think that's
Yeah.
incredible for
And here's how I
everyone.
know it. And here's how I know it works. So the other day, so David and I have a client that we're working with. I happened to be on site at the client. David was not. He was back in the office, and he sent an email out to one of the guys in the office where I was. Well, on the email signature, it had the picture of the book, right? It said pre-order now. So he goes, so this guy comes racing into my office. He missed the pre-order part. He comes racing into my office and he goes, Karin, do you have a copy of that book that's on David's signature in your purse? Because I have an emergency.
I have an emergency.
And I just laughed because it basically didn't know to call it an ACE, an acute conflict emergency, but he was in an acute conflict emergency. And so I just sat down with him and I gave him the words from one of the chapters that related to the thing. And he's like, oh, came back 2 hours later. He's like, oh, so much better. So much
Felt better. Felt confident. Felt better after having it. That, and to me, that is the cherry on top for this book. Amazing. That is the cherry on top, that I can just go specifically to the chapter that I need, get what I need, go execute, feel great back when I need something else, or if I'm preparing for a situation as well. I think you guys, that's masterful as far as the way you orchestrated this book and got it to print. So that part's super exciting. I'd love to dig into one chapter that stuck out to me, and just to kind of recap. So you're dealing with you first in the book, after the four different buckets, right? You're dealing with you, you're dealing with your boss, and then the people around you. So kind of a 360-degree look at conflict leadership. So I think that's awesome. But chapter 8 really stuck out to me, and that was what to say when you need to say no.
Yeah.
Right. One of the biggest things that we talk to people about in our community, people that we coach, even in our workshops with organizations, it's the boundaries, right? The boundaries are some of the biggest things that we've discussed over the last probably 18 months to 2 years. Not sure if that's COVID related or not, but it's a big issue. And I'd love for you all to talk a little bit about that specific chapter, and share with the audience some tips about how to say no to your boss, right? Or, I mean, and that could be your wife too, right? How do you say no?
I'm not, I think, spilling the tea here, but I have definitely used these phrases with Karin, and she has with me as well. So yes.
Good.
But, when you're talking about saying no, the first thing to realize is that anytime you say yes, you're saying no to something. So if there's a request that comes in at work to maybe join an extra project, if you say yes to that, and it may be great, it may do a lot of good things for your career, but you're also saying no to whatever else you might do with that time, or to attending your child's event, or to the volunteer project that you might do otherwise. So there's always trade-offs. And so there's no world that doesn't have trade-offs. So to start by, whenever we say yes, we're saying no to something. So when we need to say no, it's to be aware of what we can say yes to. And so if someone comes with a request, let's say it's your boss, you're talking about your boss, and they come with a request, we can validate the idea. We can definitely say yes to them as a person, and yes to their authority, and yes to the fact that what they're asking is interesting. And then we can say, so I hear what you're asking, and I am completely committed to this project and our success here. And if I were to do that, here are some of the trade-offs we're going to encounter. It's going to make the timeline for this slide because of the resources we have available. And I would be concerned about that because I know that this is a priority. I'm curious how that looks from your perspective. And so, I'm starting with that connection. I'm deeply committed to the success. All right. I've got some concerns because of these trade-offs. So now I'm getting in some clarity. And then I'm curious how this looks from your perspective. Now I'm getting into some curiosity to draw them in and see how it looks. So I haven't just flat out said, no, I'm not going to do that, right? That would not go over well in most cases in any relationship. But I've said, I've started the conversation with connection, then moved to the clarity, and now truly getting their perspective on it. And then we'll reach an agreement, and then getting to that final one, that commitment. Okay, here's what we're actually going to do. And sometimes that's the boss saying, you know what? Yeah, no, that's not a good trade-off. Forget I asked. That happens. when we have that conversation. Other times they're going to say, you know what, you're right. We can't do it this way, but maybe we can do it this way. And they find some additional resources, or they set the other priority aside. And you know what, that one can wait. Or, but we make those trade-offs. But if we don't say something, they don't have the ability to make a different choice. And that's why I like to say in those cases, silence is selfish, because you're actually keeping the other person from being able to make a better choice.
I think that's so good. That's so good to give them the option, right? When they get all of the information or what could be sacrificed. And if they decide to still go in the same route, okay, but at least they have everything on the table, especially if you're dealing with your boss. You leave yourself open to be held accountable because you never brought it up.
That's exactly right.
If you never bring up what could be sacrificed in that situation, they're just assuming you got it when you take on the assignment, and you don't have the courage to say this could get sacrificed, or I need additional resources to get this done. So I think, to your point, you're all, even though you're saying no, or even though you might be saying yes, you're saying no to something else. Right. I think that's so good. So good. So there was something else. And did you have something you wanted to add there, Karin?
I think one of the things that we see happen all the time is people say yes to their boss, but they haven't figured out how they're going to pull it off. So then something drops, either that or something else. And then the boss is like, why didn't you say something? And the person is trying to please their boss, but is just now shot themselves in the foot and damage their career, or the reputation, and the results of the team. So I think sometimes people are overly optimistic about what they think they can pull off, or they're just so scared that they say, oh, I'll worry about that tomorrow. And it actually does long-term damage.
Significant. It makes me think about myself and my co-founders, Alicia and Candace. We've known each other for close to a decade and worked together at other retailers together in our careers. And one of the things that we've talked about since we've started working together in entrepreneurial world in our podcast is that there were so many times that we had these preconceived notions and thoughts and ideas about what the situation actually was, that ultimately put a lot of extra pressure and stress on driving results that wasn't required. Right? That wasn't required, but we kind of made these things up. I got to do this and I have to do that, and I need to make sure I'm doing this. That is exhausting. Number one, leads to burnout. You're going to get overwhelmed really quickly. And if that's not what your boss is actually looking for, your organization is actually looking for, and they just need you to raise those different things that could be sacrificed, you're, again, going to be the one holding the bag, not anyone else, because you didn't raise those things, or in our case, sometimes took on more thinking that's what you had to do, but you really didn't have to.
Yep.
I don't know where that comes from. Probably have to find someone to discuss that with for my own personal development as I've been removed.
It happens all the time. Karin and I have these conversations all the time. And this is where there's powerful phrases to help with this in the book. So, it's a clarity issue. It's an easy check for understanding around clarity using one of the GOAT phrases. And like Karin and I, she'll say, hey, David, can we do this? And in my mind, okay, gosh, when am I going to fit that in? That's going to take 2 or 3 hours. And if I don't say that, she doesn't have the chance to tell me, no, just 5 minutes. I just need the 3-minute version. And
That's
so, and I want to be a team player. I want to do well. I want to help my wife, my CEO, my business partner, my whoever it is, whatever, in whatever work context you might be. And so that comes from a positive motivation. Yeah, I want to do well. I want to be helpful. And if we don't check and get on the same page about what that looks like, we can create all sorts of trauma and drama and problems for ourselves.
Yeah, and so part of that is, clarifying, what does success look like for you in this? And so your boss comes to you with something, and you think it's going to be an enormous spreadsheet that's going to require all kinds of pivot tables and extra analysis, and you got to go get some market research. And you say, so, all right, I just want to clarify what success looks like. Does it look like this? Is the end result this beautiful thing with all the pivot tables? And your boss may say, oh, no, I'm just like, do you think we can afford this? Like, order of magnitude, is this something that, oh, well, yeah, I think we can afford that. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal, right? And that's, I think, the kinds of, you can save a lot of time if you can quickly align on what is success.
Clarity and aligning on what success is. That's so good. So good. there was something else for me that I thought was so interesting, and I want to kind of hear the backstory of, I mean, I think I know why, but I want to hear the backstory from you all of why you included it. So you decided to ask the expert Chat GPT in the book, right? I thought that was so good to see how Chat GPT would respond to how they feel about conflict. And I thought that was so cool, right? And I know, I don't know the timing of when you all wrote the book, and I would imagine it was just starting to come about as you were all writing. So I'm curious to know what made you all decide to do
Uh,
that.
I mean, it really had just come out. And so, I particularly can get sucked down in a rabbit hole with that, right? Because it's just so, the thing that I find about ChatGPT is that it has a sense of humor. If you tell it to have a sense of humor, it will have a sense of humor.
Absolutely.
And so this particular chapter was about feeling invisible at work, because in the data, we noticed that there were people who said, I just feel like I'm a bot, right? I feel like I just am a cog in the wheel. Nobody really cares about me. I'm feeling invisible. And that's sad. And we don't want people to feel invisible. So I'm like, well, let's ask the bot what it feels like to be invisible. And, then he goes to kind of this humorous rant about sucking on his oil can. And so, yeah, that's what started all of that. So, yeah.
I think it's super cool though, because it for the most part, I mean, it was funny and comical, but there was a ton of truth in the
Yeah.
response and how
Yeah.
people felt. And I'm sure you probably saw it in some of the open-ended questions from the
Yeah.
survey that were parallel. And it's being trained, right? It's being trained on how we respond to things, and it's learning us as human beings. So it was able to respond. I thought that was super cool, in the moment, right? To ask the bot, because people felt that way. And I will tell you that feedback. I'm trying to remember what it was. But we probably said robot, right? And
Right.
not bot back in the
Yeah.
day, right? It was,
Yeah.
I feel like a robot, or just, somebody that's just a number or being used,
Mhm.
or whatever
Yeah.
that may look like.
Yeah. I will never forget this experience. So I was in my corporate job. I had a very large customer service role. And I was talking to one of our very senior leaders, and they were wanting to script like every word, every single word that the people in the call centers would say. And I'm like, that is not going to provide a great customer experience. They're going to sell. And I said, I want them to be able to think. And he looked at me and he said, I don't want them to think. I want them to read the script. And I like, oh, like that is not good. That's not good. And so because, he didn't want them to get it wrong, and he didn't trust that their intuition would provide a better customer experience. So, opens a whole other can of worms. But there are people, that's why people feel like bots, because
Uh,
there are people at senior level saying some of those kinds of things. Now, I didn't listen to him. So,
right, right, right.
right. But somebody else probably did.
That part.
Yeah.
I don't want them. Man, that's tough in
Yeah.
a customer service role, because
Right.
was it a phone
Uh-huh.
customer?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, surefire way to get like ripped to shreds by whoever's on the other line is that
Right.
you, like, you're reading from the script. I've been in that situation. Not with your former employee. I will say that I had pretty good customer service. I still use them. But I would say that I'm quick to say, okay, I know you're reading from page so and so and so and so, section 2 of that. I need you to close the book and
And
get
listening
your
to the
manager on the phone, right? Coming from,
Right.
I spend a lot of time in customer service. Like, I that's not the question that I asked. That's a quick way. A
Yeah.
quick way versus some understanding, connection, right?
Right.
To your point, that's exactly in that situation was needed. So I'm happy you didn't listen, because whew, and more we're either in a chat situation online, or we're on the phone with almost all customer service, unless you're in a physical location. That's pretty much where we're at, and a lot of it is online chat. So I think that's an incredible example. So as we kind of wrap up this incredible interview about this incredible book, you get 300 phrases. I know we talked about it, but I had so many questions I wanted to ask. I wanted to make sure we emphasize that there's 300. That's a lot almost have one for every day of the year, right? 300
Take weekends
phrases.
off. Yeah.
And just take the weekends off. But you got 300 phrases in the book that are going to help people in the moment, right? And of course, you want to customize them to your personality and your tone, but you got 300 phrases, which I think will probably, that will be a huge part of your legacy and live on as we continue to use this book for years to come. But what else would you all like to share about the book, about the work that you're doing as well?
The only thing that I would want to add is it is what happens on the other side of having these conversations. So many of the people said that they regret not having the conversation sooner. And in that example that I gave where the guy came in his acute conflict emergency, afterwards, after he had the conversation, he had worked it up so bad in his mind that the actual conversation was easy. And he's like, why did I not do this a month ago? And so that's what I would encourage your listeners, whether or not you're using the phrases in this book or you're using your own phrases, have the courage to speak the truth in a way that is focused on creating connection and getting to shared success and having a commitment at the end and showing up really curious in these conversations. And you will do that. It will be less stress.
Yes.
And better results for you and for the other person and for the work you're doing.
That's incredible. Great point, David.
And again, the name of the book is Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict, What to Say Next to De-Stress the Workday, Build Collaboration, and Calm Difficult Customers. And just echoing what Karin said, was coaching a manager a few weeks ago. Similar situation, guy's 30 years old, had a career challenge he was dealing with. And I said, well, have you had the conversation? He's like, no. Gave him the phrases from the book. Text me a week later. He said, I'm going to get a tattoo. I said, oh yeah? What kind of tattoo? He said, it's going to say, just have the conversation. He's like, I need it on my arm because it's so helpful. It went so well. I don't know I'm going to get everything I want, but now they know. And it's good. And what was I not having it for? So much positive can happen if we'll have the conversation. And now you've got 300 plus phrases to help that happen.
That's incredible. Just have the conversation. Normally I end the podcast by asking the guests to share their final 5 words, but I think that those 4 are perfect. Just have the conversation. We're not going to do 5 today because that's perfect. And someone to want to get it tattooed, I think is so important. But when I think about the things that we struggle with as human beings, a huge chunk of them can be solved with just having the conversation. So I think that's incredible. I'm so excited for the world to read this book and enjoy this book and put this book into action. I think the world would be a better place for you all have written this book, and for those that read it, I think the world will be better off because of it. And that's a huge part of your legacy that I think will live on forever. So thank you for the work, the time, the effort that you put into it. I appreciate you sharing with our audience today, and I can't wait to spend more time with you all in the future. I know we're going to cross paths more and more, and I can't wait to do that. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much. You are just a delight to talk with. Really enjoyed the conversation. So appreciate your support, all you do to encourage courage and grow leaders. I know that is a huge part of your legacy, and it's good to be involved with you as a kindred spirit.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And as I always like to end every podcast, again, I received the love and all the comments and all the appreciation for the work, as Karin mentioned, that we're doing. And that ultimately helps us to make sure we're doing the right things by you all. And we want to make sure you're getting the right information when you need it and timely career hacks. So we appreciate you for that. And I'll end by saying I love you and have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed doing it for you. However, it doesn't have to end there. Come on over to our Facebook group community right now for free. You're going to get exclusive content that we weren't able to include in this episode as well as past episodes. We've got challenges, we've got research, we've got lives, you name it, all for you in bite-sized chunks so that you can continue this development journey. Go ahead, click the link right now in the description show notes, and we'll see you there.